right, everybody, welcome on into KBO Chats Live. I'm Sam Pasco alongside Eric Halterman, and we're breaking down the top KBO picks from a loaded and stacked KBO slate. A lot of games, a lot of action. Eric, how you feeling right now? KBO still going on right now. Cases on the decline. Overall, not too much news outside the Eagles president actually resigning, Jung-Hoo Park, because of a COVID mishandling with the Eagles. I mean, couldn't think the Eagles could get any worse this year, and then there their front office goes.
Yeah, maybe learning why the team is struggling, and I think has been for several seasons. Doesn't seem like anything really goes too well over there for the Eagles, unfortunately.
Definitely not, and we'll talk about them tonight. Not in a good position. As always, we are taking in questions, so you can join the broadcast here. Crash, welcome on in. And Josh, already commenting even before the show started, welcome on in whenever you get a chance to watch the show. So let's get started here. First up, my favorite team, if I can have a favorite team, that's the NC Dinos. We last spoke on Monday, and that's when Mike Wright started, and he showed off that dad strength with a great start. And then 2 days ago, we saw a rain out of pretty much all the games except one. And since that Mike Wright start, we've seen the Dinos lose 2 games. I don't know what's up with this team right now. What's going on with them? They're facing tough competition, but not looking good.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it's 2 losses to the Twins and Heroes. No real shame in losing to teams that are that close behind you in the standings, and they lost by a total of 3 runs. So I wouldn't necessarily assume that their hot streak, they had won 6 out of 7. I wouldn't necessarily assume that they've completely fallen off. But, they're not at a place where they're going to blow out every team like they were at some points in the year. So I think this should be a tight game, at least in theory.
Yeah, their offense has been down from their season average of about 6.2 runs per game. Over their last 3, they've been putting up just about 4.5. So not really good offensively. In terms of pitching, we're looking at Drew Rosinski. Is he back yet? I know we can take a look at his stats here, but there were some questions and marks around him being a true number 1. Is he kind of back to his form after those 7 strong innings against the Wyverns?
Yeah, it's interesting. He's basically alternated between bad and good for 6 straight. Those 5, 8, and 7 earned runs for 3 of those bad starts are, I think, 3 of his highest all year. They may be exactly his 3 highest earned runs allowed. It's not the best stretch over those 6, even with the good starts factored in. 6.35 ERA in his last 6, 1.62 WHIP, and that's after he had an ERA of 1.99 and a WHIP of 1.08 in his first 14. So he's definitely fallen off a bit, although he's now more or less on the season overall exactly where he was last season. I think his ERA and WHIP are both within a couple points. His ERA is up by 0.13 and his WHIP is up by 0.05. It's more or less the same guy when you factor in that the ball is a bit livelier this year. League-wide offense is up. It may even count as a very slight improvement. So more or less what he's done season long, if you factor in his strong and weak stretches, seems to be pretty much who he is, and that's quite a good starter, even if it's not quite a Dan Straley, Chang Mo Koo level. It's somebody you're pretty happy with.
Yeah, you got to be. Yes, we're asking a lot of him, but he's given us a lot, especially earlier this year. 13 wins overall. It's impressive. Before we go for the Twins, looking offensively at this team, who are you looking at? I mean, Minwoo Park, 6-game hitting streak, 4 hits in that loss on Tuesday, however you count that. And Aaron Altair also in a 7-game hit streak, 7 hits to begin September. What are we looking at this stacked, deep Dinos team?
Yeah, Altair might be a good direction to go tonight just because they're facing a lefty, although Sungbum Na is so good that you don't necessarily have to care. He's maybe fallen off from his absolutely hot stretch, Sungbum Na, but he was the best hitter in the league for a 10, 15-game stretch there throughout most of August, maybe even more than that. He's a guy who, again, is trying to come to MLB this offseason. At least that was the report heading into the year. He missed most of last year after a serious knee injury. Needed to prove that he was healthy and could swing a hot bat again, and he sure can. I think he's an MVP candidate again. He was never really that cold, but he had fallen everybody had fallen behind Mel Rojas Jr. for a stretch there, but now that Rojas is cooling off again. I think Na is up there, top 3, top 5 hitter in the league. I think he can carry him almost any night, even with a lefty on the mound for the Twins.
Sungbum Na, Dino's catcher. He is at MVP level talent. Switching our attention now to the LG Twins. They're just 2 games back of first place. They were looking like a top 5 team, and now they're looking like a top 3 team when you look at their offensive numbers. This really surprised me. They're 3rd in runs scored and 2nd in runs prevented. They've been great over their last 6. Over their last 7, they've been averaging 6 runs, and they haven't lost. There's that one tie in there, but I'll give them that as the benefit of the doubt. 5 runs against the Bears. This team's hot. I think this could be maybe a really competitor to the Kiwoom Heroes as that true number 2 team.
Yeah, I think if the final 3 comes down to a semifinal between two of the 3 of the Dinos, Heroes, and Twins, with the winner taking on the 3rd, I think that would be a very exciting end to the season. Would certainly be my pick at this point. I think those 3 teams are pulling away from the rest of the pack by at least a bit. The Twins, as you mentioned, they're super balanced. They're the only team in the top 3 in both runs scored and runs allowed. The Heroes are just a bit behind, and the Dinos are behind in pitching. And they've been really hot lately. Like you mentioned, 7-game undefeated streak. But really, you can go back over their last 38 games. They're winning more than 70% of their games. So it's been, they looked like the best team in the league, more or less, over that stretch. The Heroes have been quite hot, too. But yeah, they're doing what they were doing, even better than what they were doing early in the year. They look like a totally different team than they were throughout the middle stretch. Their pitching's come on, their hitting's gotten healthy. Roberto Ramos is Roberto Ramos again. I think they can beat anybody right now.
Yeah, and they really are beating pretty much everyone. When you look at their last 3 games, they've actually been playing 3 different teams. I just thought that was a little unusual, just how kind of the rainouts work. But no, it's been an impressive group. Yes, you've even played the Wyverns in there, but we're looking at Wiz, Bears, Dinos, and they've beat them all. In terms of the starting pitcher going for them tonight, Hyun-Sik Kim. Back-ended numbers, not a lot of strikeouts, but pretty good in his last start against KT. Is this guy for real?
He may be one day. He's a 19, 20-year-old rookie who was 3rd overall pick, I think, in this year's draft. So he's got the potential, but it doesn't seem like he's there yet. His last start was good, scoreless, 6 scoreless innings, but he did only strike out 2. So it's not like he dominated. But again, against the Wiz, if you're holding the Wiz scoreless with just 2 hits, no way you can call that a disappointing start. But over his 4 previous starts, it was a 7.58 ERA and a 1.74 WHIP. And on the season as a whole, 8.5% walk rate is more or less exactly league average, but just striking out 13.8% of batters. That's more than 4 ticks below league average. And that looks like at most a 4 or 5 starter to me. Just allows way too much contact. And, sometimes it works out like it did last time where the plate striking out just 2 guys, only 2 hits get through, but I would not expect him to have an easy time against the lineup as good as the Dinos here.
In case you're just tuning in, this is KBO Chats Live. Barry, welcome in. Of course, we just finished breaking down the Dinos Twins matchup, finishing up now. In terms of offense, who are you looking at? Hyun-Sik Kim is a guy that's, pretty hot. Former Philly, former Deuce and Bear as well. 5-game hitting streak coming into tonight, and a 325 batting average since August 21st. He's hot, and maybe he can kind of carry the load when Ramos isn't, at his best.
Yeah, though I don't know, Ramos isn't getting too cold. He has gone hitless twice in his last 3, but over his last 30 games, he's got an OPS of 1,025 with 13 homers. So a pretty extended stretch where he looks like Roberto Ramos, striking out a lot, but hitting it over the fence whenever he does hit it. Somehow 13 homers against just 2 doubles. A bit odd. It's probably a bit of overachievement there, but even if that falls off a bit, he's still one of the best sluggers in the league. He can hit one out on anybody. He'd be a decent play, I think, against Rucinski, even though Rucinski has generally been quite good. He has been shaky lately, and if his name puts people off of Ramos in this one, I wouldn't hate taking a shot on him.
All right, then let's get your pick now. Rucinski against this hot Twins team. Where are you going?
I've got to go Dinos. I think Brzezinski is one of the better pitchers in the league, even if he's a bit shaky lately. And Kim looks like a rookie who's mostly been over his head. So I think pretty easy Drew Brzezinski for me, and therefore pretty easy Lions. Or
And
wow, not Lions, Dinos.
Dinos all the way here. 10 runs is the total, though. Does Aaron Altera and Roberto Ramos have enough to power these offenses, even though these two pitchers are capable of throwing gems?
Yeah, I haven't seen enough gems from Yunzik Kim to think he's going to keep the Dinos score down. We know all about that Dinos bullpen. Brzezinski may keep the Twins down for 6 or 7, but who knows what happens after that. So I'd go over here.
We're liking the over 10 runs on the game. Getting this here. Over 10. All right. So moving on now. We have a doubleheader game. This one's at 2 a.m. Eastern. Beginning it off, Tigers and Giants. Kia won this game 1 yesterday, and they got Jong Yang going today, a guy you like on the cheat sheet. Horrible year this year so far compared to what he did last year. But now he has 2 straight scoreless outings under his belt, 1.48 ERA over his last 4 outings. I think he might have officially returned to form and could be that number 2 to Aaron Brooks.
Yeah, in theory, he should have been the number 1. He was, again, 3rd place in MVP voting last year, 2nd among pitchers to only Josh Lindblom, who's now a major leaguer. So you'd expect huge things from Yang. He had a 2.29 ERA last year. Through his first 12 starts this season, it was a 6.31 ERA, which is just terrible. But over his last 8, it's been quite good, 2.63 ERA, which isn't quite as elite as last year, but it's certainly good enough. And importantly, too, he's striking out 10.5 batters per 9 innings over his last 8. So he's got that strikeout stuff back. One of the better strikeout arms in the league at 21.1%, along with a roughly league average walk rate. That's what you need in a frontline starter, and he's looked like one for quite some time.
Offensively, this Kia Tigers team, hasn't been known for the best offense, but we did see Hung Woo Choi, not the first Choi in the lineup, the third one, and Min Sik Kim have multi-hit games the last time these two teams faced off. Tucker's a little cold. Where are you going offensively with this Tigers lineup?
Yeah, he's cold, but only for 2 or 3 games. I think Tucker's been on for a pretty long stretch. We know he gets cold at times, but over 8 games before these last 3, he had an OPS of 1231 with 4 homers in an 8-game stretch. I don't know if I'm ready to call him totally cooled off yet, and I think he'd be a pretty good play against Jun-Won So, who is pretty unremarkable for the Giants. He hasn't allowed more than 3 earned runs in any of his last 4 starts, Jun-Won So, but 2 of those starts were quite short, so they don't really count as particularly good. It's a 2.95 ERA over those last 4, but a 1.58 whip and just 9 strikeouts to go against 8 walks. So I don't think it really counts as a particularly strong stretch for him. He's been pretty unremarkable throughout the year. He has second lowest strikeout rate among qualified starters at 11.7%, as well below league average. He's only beating Hee Kwon Yu in that category, who I'm sure we'll talk about later. So just allows a ton of contact, and a guy like Tucker should be able to make some loud contact if he gets that many chances to hit, I think.
Yeah, I'm always worried when Tucker has 2 games stumble that could be the start of something, because we've seen that happen before. But right, you said Giants running out So, which the young righty hasn't done great. 4 walks compared to just 1 strikeout in his last start. So maybe some command issues, and it could be a bullpen game. Can you maybe tell us about that bullpen? Because So only went 3 innings in that start against Kiwoom his last time out.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much that was intentional and how much it was just he wasn't very good. The Giants do have a pretty good pitching staff overall. So if they do get in there, decent chance they'll do all right. Although who knows what kind of arms they want to preserve for the second game. I guess they probably don't need to preserve too many because it'll be Dan Straley going in the second game. So maybe in that case they'd feel comfortable enough turning it over to some of their strong relievers early. But even with Straley on the mound, I don't think you want to use up all your best arms in the first game of a doubleheader. So I think if they knock out So, again, even against a bullpen that's overall pretty strong, I think that'd be pretty good news for the Tigers.
All right. And last thing, offensively, the Giants, Dixon Machado, Daeho Lee, not super hot, but guy right behind them, actually ahead of Machado, right? Sandwiched in between them, Dong Hee Han, 5-game hitting streak. Since he's returned from injury, he's increased both his batting average on and on base. Those first 2 games back were a little rough, but now he seems to be finding his flow. Is he someone we should worry about, or is Yang for the Tigers pretty much, ace level stuff?
Yeah, the one thing here is the Giants are extremely right-handed, and Yang is a lefty. But I don't think I'd feel particularly comfortable starting many Giants tonight against a guy like Yang, who has been one of the best starters in the league over the last couple months and was one of the best starters last year. So I don't think I'd have all that much interest in him. The Giants have several guys who, like you said, up through about 6, who are acceptable plays on most nights. But I don't think this will be the night for me.
All right, so I'm gonna guess you're gonna go Tigers here, banking on another good Yang start.
Yep, I'm gonna go that way, and I think I'd go under 2, even though I don't have a lot of faith in Gen 1. So Tigers lineup isn't that great. So even if So has a shaky night, it may be a 5-2, 5-3 kind of game here.
All right, we will get to that doubleheader talking about Dan Straley in a bit, but before we do want to get to the Wyverns and Wiz, another 2 a.m. Eastern game time here. Again, another guy you like, Despani, another cheat sheet guy. Wiz won game 1 here, but I'm actually not so sure about Despani. 4+ runs in 2 of his last 3. Why do you like this guy for the Wiz tonight against this Wyverns offense?
Well, it was actually Juan Carlos Blanco with today's cheat sheet, but I do generally think good enough things about Despaigne. But he hasn't been awesome over his last 3, like you said, 5.60 ERA and a 192 WHIP. Not particularly good. 8 strikeouts against 7 walks over just his last 2 starts is not great. Although on the season as a whole, it's basically league average strikeout rate and slightly better than league average walk rate. Not necessarily ace material, but adequate enough for what you need out of 1 year 2 foreign starters. He was on quite a good roll heading into his last 3, where he's been a bit shaky. He had a 2.05 ERA over a 5-start stretch, so he's capable of long runs of close to ace form. But he's also had some blowups. He has an 8. Does he also have a 10 in there? He had some shaky results early. So yeah, he's been very up and down. He's not all the way down lately, but he's not at his best at the moment.
Offensively, this Wiz team is pretty much getting back to where they should be. 17 runs in their last 2 games. Rojas starting September hot. This team back to an offensive juggernaut overall?
Yeah, I think so. Rojas was quite cold, like disturbingly cold, for about 2 or 3 weeks after being easily the best player, best hitter in the league for most of the year. It's 3 hits in his last 2 games, I think, so there's some encouraging signs there. Beko Gong has been quite good for a long time. He went over a month without a homer, but he's starting to show some power again. Several multi-hit games recently. In his last 10, he's got an OPS of 1191 with 3 homers, hitting 395. So he'd be a guy I'd be interested here. Rojas pretty much always playable. So it's a ton of very strong talent in the heart of that lineup that can outslug just about anybody.
Yeah, Rojas hit his first home run of September 2 games ago, so looking to keep that going strong against the Wyverns. Offensively for the Wyverns, actually starting with their offense, I mean, outside their 2 through 5 batters, it looks like they got nothing. I think they provided 7 of their 8 hits in their last game. In that loss, the Wyverns, are they going to be able to keep up with the scoring of Rojas and Beko Gong?
Probably not. They do have, again, some quite good bats. I mean, Jung Choi is second best all time in homers in KBO. He's as good as anybody. He's not that old yet either. I mean, he's in his mid-30s, but he's not over the hill by any means. Jamie Romack also maybe fading a bit from what he was doing in his first few years with the Wyverns, but still offers something. Dong Min Han is a decent power hitter who hits a little bit behind them, though he's been cold lately. So there's something there, and Despaigne is not looking elite, so I think those guys are playable. It's going to just be a question of can Jung Hoon Park shut down the strong Wiz lineup, and I'm not sure he can. 5 earned runs in each of his last 2 starts. He had a stretch of 8 straight with 3 or fewer earned runs, but his last 2, again, it's 11 total runs, 10 earned runs in just 7.2 innings, 2 strikeouts against just 5 walks. Some very worrisome performance in his last couple, and against a lineup as good as the Wiz, I think the Wyverns could be in trouble here.
Yeah, I was going to say Park, 10 earned runs in his last 7 2/3 innings pitch. So I'm thinking an easy over more so than necessarily the Wiz winning, because I don't necessarily look at Despaigne being an ace, because you said Jong Choi, Don Min Han, Jamie Romack, they can score 26 runs. I mean, they're capable of that. So I would think the over would be the preferred lean in this game.
Yeah, I would go over, and I'm going to go Wiz. Even if Despaign's been shaky, Park's been shakier, and the Wiz have a deeper and stronger lineup. The Wyverns are 9th in scoring, even with those strong bats in the middle. So I don't think, even if Despaigne isn't at his best, I think he'll still be good enough for a win here.
All right, that's fair. Moving on now to, I want to now get to a double header here. Dan Straley, someone you hinted at earlier. Very unusual start his last time out. 11 strikeouts. He actually had a 12 strikeout game, so it wasn't his highest. But 5 earned runs, and this was all against the Hanwha Eagles, the most dysfunctional team in the entire league. I don't know what really to say about Straley here. Is he going to be, especially coming game 2, is he going to be ready to go?
It's 2 shaky starts in his last 3, too. I think it was 5 or so earned runs, 2 starts before his last one. But he's still Dan Straley. Like you said, 11 strikeouts, despite giving up 5 runs in his last start. Doesn't say to me that he was way off his game by any means. It's hard to strike out 11 and be off. And he's still, his season-long numbers are still excellent, even with 2 shaky starts in his last 3. He still trails only Eric Jokic in both ERA and WHIP among qualified starters. He also trails Cheng Mo-Koo, but Cheng Mo-Koo has been injured long enough that he's not technically a qualified starter anymore. And that also means Straley is top in strikeout rate by a huge margin. 26.3% is 4 points better than any other qualified starter, which makes him even better probably in fantasy than he is in real life, though unfortunately the second games of these doubleheaders are not included on DraftKings slate tonight, so you won't get the chance to use him. But I guess that just makes it a more interesting game because there's rarely a reason not to use Straley, especially against a mediocre lineup like the Tigers here. I'm not too worried about 2 shaky starts when the underlying numbers are just fine.
Yeah, let me ask you then about the total here. Ki Young Him actually had a pretty good start against the Dinos, but then was lit up for 10 total runs in his other 2 starts. Do you think there's any edge in terms of going on the under, being this is going to be the second game of the doubleheader? We got a question here about maybe, leaning towards that under because the offenses, especially for the Tigers, that might not already be inherently sound, might be even more tired, and thus we skew towards the under.
Right. You've got slightly tired hitters. You also might get more bench guys going really on either game. You generally would only start the best few hitters for both games, and you might give most of your bench guys a start in one of the 2. So that, in theory, leans towards the under, although, of course, you're also likely to have used some of your best relievers in game 1. So that would probably more or less cancel out most of it. So I think with those 2 factors combined, I wouldn't necessarily budge things a ton. Although for the Tigers, there's a chance they don't have to use too many good pitchers in the first one with Hyunjin Yang going. But I think I would still go under here mostly because it's Dan Straley. On the other side, Ki Young Im, he started the year really strong. Through his first 9 starts, it was a 2.96 ERA and a 1.21 WHIP. But the it's fallen apart over his last 7. That one dominant start against the Dinos that you mentioned was pretty much his only good one in his last 7. 6.95 ERA and a 166 WHIP. And unfortunately, that's more or less who he was for most of his recent seasons. His ERA in his last 2 years was 5.73 and 6.26. So he was really, barely a back end starter, more of a swingman in terms of talent. I mean, I don't think you're very comfortable starting a guy with a 6.26 ERA all year. He looks a lot more like that guy, unfortunately. His strikeout rate's fallen a lot, but it's still above average overall to go along with a better than average walk rate. But he hasn't necessarily been that guy lately. Really just one strong start recently. Although, again, he is a righty going against a very right-handed Giants lineup that isn't remarkable by any means. So there's a chance that he does his part in hitting the under, but I'd still go under overall, mostly just because of Straley.
Yeah, weird thing about that good Dino start he had, it was his second straight time. It was actually a decent amount of time physically, but it was the second time facing them. Normally we see, especially with Aaron Brooks, when we face the Twins 3 times in a row, the offense learns the pitcher. That was opposite here, but a mediocre start his last time out against the Wyverns. So you're going to lean towards the Giants and the under as your official pick.
Yep, and it's, again, mostly Dan Straley. He's by far the most significant player in that game and by far the best. So,
yeah, he's one of the best pitchers, if not the best pitcher, pretty much any night he goes out there, except for recently. We'll put a little asterisk recently, but no rain in that game. It looks like it. Moving back to a game 1, 5:30 a.m. Eastern start, which is time for the second game, but it's going to be the first one of the series. Lions and Bears. If I told you these two teams were in a slugfest, you tell me who wins, Bears, Lions, you would think the Bears, right? But that's not what happened last time. Lions won that slugfest, but tonight we have some pretty solid pitching. I mean, David Buchanan can be anywhere from an ace to a complete trash pitcher, but I think he could be due for a good start tonight. What are we looking at in this Bears and Lions matchup?
Yeah, the thing about Bears and Slugfest is that their pitching staff can give up runs with the best of them. I think they're 8th in the league in runs out allowed, 8th out of 10, beating only the Wyverns and Eagles. So it seems like even the Lions can get hot when they face the Bears. It's 2 of the more fun pitchers, 2 of the more giftable pitchers, I guess, if you're into that, going tonight. But man, Hee Kwan Yu is it's a fascinating stat line. He strikes out 8.3% of opposing batters. It's about 8.3% more than you or I could manage. So not too big of an insult to him there, but it's lower than any other qualified starter by 3.4 percentage points. I mean, even Jun-Won So, who we talked about earlier, strikes out nearly 50% more batters than he does. He basically doesn't try to strike guys out, and sometimes it works for him. He's only allowed 6 earned runs in his last 4 starts. It's a 2.19 ERA. But I don't know if you can really say he pitched that well, because it's a whip of 1.62 is quite bad, and 7 strikeouts going against 8 walks. So again, maybe with him, you don't always judge his performance by strikeouts and walks, because he doesn't really even seem to go for strikeouts. Sometimes his worst stretches are when he's slightly better in strikeouts, it seems, throughout the year. But that kind of goes against everything I know about analyzing a pitcher. But basically, he just allows way too much contact, and he goes on stretches where it works, and he goes on stretches where it doesn't. I'm not sure it's going to work in this one, even against a lineup that's generally pretty bad, like the Lions. They're playing in the league's most hitter-friendly park, Daegu Samsung Lions Park, and I think that's going to matter more than the Lions' overall mediocrity. I think they should score a few off you here, but everybody should score quite a few off you, and very frequently they don't. So I still am going to stick with what I know about every other pitcher, in that this sort of approach generally doesn't work. It worked for him last year. He had a 3.25 ERA with just a 9.3% strikeout rate, which again is better than this year, but is still just off the charts low. And it worked. So maybe it'll keep working, but it's not like he's been a dominant pitcher forever, because just 2 years ago his ERA was 6.70. So it doesn't always work for him. There's no real reason to believe it's going to work on a given day. I'm never really interested in him for fantasy purposes. He averages just 2.1 strikeouts per start. So you're basically just committing to getting no help there and just hoping he doesn't give up runs and gets a win thanks to his offense. And that's not enough for me most of the time. So
Yeah, maybe a little overplaying his recent success, but I mean, it is impressive. Any sort of four-start stretch like that, where you're looking at 2 or fewer runs, got to respect that. But you definitely disrespect the strikeout numbers. I mean, when you're looking at 3 total strikeouts over 3 starts, that's definitely not something that you want to be banking on as a pitcher. In terms of David Buchanan, he is always good for a little internet gif every now and then, having some of the most fun in the KBO. But recently hasn't been poor start, a fine start, below average. I don't know exactly how you say. His last one went against Kiwoom because decent offense, and he did go 6.2 innings. But, I don't know what we're going to get tonight, especially when the Bears put up 10 runs last night.
Yeah, I think the Bears lineup is good enough, and enough of their best hitters will get the platoon advantage too. They're a very left-handed team in the heart of their order. If Buchanan's a righty, he's coming off a couple, mediocre starts, I guess you could say. 7 earned runs in 12.2 innings is okay, but 18 hits is not good. 5 strikeouts against 6 walks is not good. And even if you extend it out to his last 6, it's 15 strikeouts against 17 walks. Those are some Ricardo Pinto-esque numbers, which is not what you want to hear. Although, again, it's generally worked for him, except for when he completely implodes. On the season as a whole, he is a low strikeout guy, but nowhere near Lee Kuan Yew levels. 14.2% is just normal low strikeouts, and he doesn't walk too many guys, 6.9%. That kind of looks more like a mid-rotation starter than you want out of one of your foreign starters. And I think with a guy who's got those kind of numbers against the lineup as good as the Bears in the league's most hitter-friendly park, he's not a guy I'd be too comfortable in starting. Even though, again, he does have quite a few 0 or 1 earned run starts this season, but I don't think this is going to be one of them.
Yeah, beginning August, he had 2 pretty solid outings. He had 1 scoreless going 7, and then 1 run in 7 innings. But keep in mind, those were against the Eagles and Wyverns. He faced the Wyverns again, did even worse. Heroes, even worse. You think maybe he's going to be at home, settle down? Well, you're talking about Daegu Samson, Alliance Park, most hitter friendly. So, are we thinking then another slugfest tonight? I mean, these pitchers are capable of throwing, 2 runs in 6 innings, but I don't know if we're going to see that tonight.
Yeah, I would expect plenty of runs here. I think the over is the most comfortable part of this pick here. Again, I would think also their bullpen should be pretty tired. The starters last night threw a combined 7 innings. So that might mean that they just ask you and Buchanan to pitch, 7 innings, regardless of how many runs they're giving up. I think that's how Buchanan ends up with some of his 8s and 10s and 7s on his earned run totals, just because they say, we just need you to get outs. Don't really care much beyond that. So I would expect a lot of runs here. And I think the Bears lineup is enough better than the Lions that I'm going to side with the Bears, even though I do think Buchanan is better than Lee Kuan Yew. And the Lions, they did pull it off last time. But just too much talent in the heart of that Bears order. Jose Fernandez, Jaiolo, Jaewon Kim, that really elite run of lefties. And even any of their top 6 are quite good hitters. So I think there's going to be too much there. Still haven't seen anything from Daniel Palka on the Lions. I think he maybe managed a hit in that blowout, but I believe his OPS is in the 500s still. Again, tiny sample size. Way too early to write him off. If Lee Kuan Yew was right-handed, I'd be pretty interested in him here, just because he stays quite cheap until he's actually done anything, given that he's only played 8 games. Wouldn't write him off by any means yet, but he really has not shown anything. So I just don't think the Lions lineup is close to the Bears, which means I would expect the Bears to win this one most of the time.
Hey, don't discount Daniel Palka's 1 RBI in that game last night.
True.
Not much production, and you can see there here on rotowire.com, you can see strikeouts in every game he's played since two of them, and that was just when he was beginning the year. So not looking good for Palka and the Lions tonight against the Bears. Moving on, we got another solo game, as in there's not a corresponding doubleheader with it. Heroes and the Eagles. The Eagles almost won yesterday, but they find a way to lose night in, night out. Chad Bell back to his normal regular self, 6 earned runs in his start. But tonight we actually have some pretty solid, not solid in terms of long-term success, but recently, Honey Han, Min Woo Kim, they combined for 16 strikeouts in their last start. You combine them together in a total of 2 earned runs. If they gave that level of production tonight, I could see an under here.
Yeah, Han in particular has just got a very strange game log. He had that one stretch where he allowed, I think it was 17 runs while getting a total of like 5-ish outs over 2 starts. But then since then, he's been fine, mostly. I had a couple blow-ups, but he's bounced back from a couple poor starts with a very good one against the Lions, which doesn't count for much. But I mean, nine strikeouts against just 2 walks and 4 hits in 7 innings. Can't complain about that. Over his last 8 starts, it's a 4.13 ERA, which is nothing special, but it's a WHIP of 0.90. He's really not walking anybody. 6 walks in his last 8 starts to go against 44 strikeouts. And on the season as a whole, it's more or less a league average strikeout rate, but a quite low 5.5% walk rate. That's a pretty solid mid-rotation starter if you just look at those numbers and not his ERA. It hasn't necessarily actually translated into good performances, but again, it's that stretch at the start of July. I guess I was a little unfair saying he just got 5 outs, but he got 11 outs while giving up 19 hits and 17 runs over a 2-start stretch. He's capable of doing that, and then he's bounced back and been quite good in a lot of areas. So he's maybe even a bigger mystery than David Buchanan, just a bit of a lower profile.
Yeah, that's quite the mystery here when you look at that, 17 earned run stretch to now, only 1, 2, 3 starts, 4 plus, but still he's been going deep into games too recently. 7 innings, 5, a 6, pretty solid numbers. Eagles pitcher Min Woo Kim, a little worse, but not drastically maybe from what we'd expect from an Eagles starter in terms of recent performance. Is he someone that could quiet Addison Russell, who's actually already kind of cold right now?
Yeah, he's been decent. He never pitches deep into games. He hasn't reached 6 innings since June 4th, but he's been okay. In his last 6 starts, he's only allowed more than 3 earned runs once. He's got a 3.68 ERA over those last 6. Though 25 strikeouts against 22 walks is not very encouraging. Walk problems are more or less what's gotten him all year long. 12.1% walk rate is well above league average. So he does strike out plenty of guys, 20.4%. League average there is 18-ish%. So he'll get some whiffs, and he'll let a ton of guys on base, and he gets punished for it sometimes. The Heroes are good enough that I think they have a good shot to punish him here. I wouldn't be too comfortable playing Kim, although he does have strikeout upside. He gets 7, 6, 6 numbers like that in just 5 to, again, he just basically never goes 6 innings. So he strikes out plenty of guys, and it's potentially worth a shot. I mean, last time he did face these Heroes, he only allowed 1 run in 5 innings. So weirdly, that time he didn't strike out anybody. So yeah, he's not reliable, but a decent some mid-rotation arm, which is pretty good for a team like the Eagles.
Yeah, some unusual pitchers on the slate tonight. Offensively, got to start with the Eagles. Got to celebrate Brandon Barnes' 3rd career multi-hit game. Not much otherwise, but he did have a multi-hit game. Anyone in the Eagles lineup excite you tonight for the slate?
I mentioned Young-Kyu Lee every now and then whenever the Eagles are facing a shaky righty. If I feel like I have to mention someone from the Eagles, he has essentially no power. I think it's like 2 homers in his last 3 seasons, but he hits for good contact and walks a ton. steals some bases, makes him a decent play. Even though the overall OPS is pretty low, but you'll get, a few singles, maybe a steal, maybe a run. So he's something, but unfortunately, there's just not enough Eagles to more or less ever recommend stacking them. I'm not sure. I may have done so once or twice in the first week or two this year, but I can't remember having done it since. And I don't think I'd start now, even if Hyun Hee Han is somewhat shaky.
The naivete of week 1 of KBO, back when we thought everyone was on an even playing field. Offensively, looking at the Heroes, definitely a stronger team when it comes to all aspects of the game. But Addison Russell, Jung Ho Lee, maybe not on their best stretches to start September. Guy I like, Hong Sung Kim, getting kind of hot right now. 7 hits in the month of September so far. Kiwoom Heroes, what are we looking lineup-wise?
Yeah, definitely Kim's been the hot hero lately. He's an exciting player. I think there's a chance he comes over to MLB this offseason. There was talk that he was going to get posted because I believe the Heroes are short on cash. Either that or their owners want to have more money, more than they want to have a good team, one or the other. But I think the plan is for him to come over. I think he has a shot to have some success. He does some of everything. He hits over 300 or very close to it every year. He can take a walk. He can steal bases. He's got good power for a shortstop. 22 homers already this year. That is quite good. I think he does some of everything. I think he's got a shot to be a big league quality infielder, middle infielder. I'm not sure if he'll be a star or even a starter, but I think he has legitimate talent. He's an interesting play, especially given that he's eligible at shortstop, even though he's moved off the position for Addison Russell mostly lately. But he's a very interesting player. He won't get the platoon advantage against Kim, but I don't think Kim is anything, or Minwoo Kim is anything that should scare you off of him here.
Yeah, like in Ha-Sung Kim and that Kim on Kim matchup. Overall, Heroes and over or under. I'm not sure which way you're going to go.
Yeah, either starter is capable of allowing plenty of runs, so I think I'm going to go over. I think there's a decent chance, we just need one of them to have a bad game. Though the Eagles, it's worth noting, the Eagles are all the way up to 9th in runs allowed, so it's been some better pitching from the bullpen lately, I guess, and some decent starts too. Congrats to them for not being literally the worst at everything. The Wyverns are giving them a run for their money in some of the stats. I don't know if the Eagles are going to stay 9th for the rest of the year, but I have to give them props for that. Seems like every time the Eagles do anything remotely decent, we shout it out. So worth shouting that out for them.
Well, we have to, considering how bad they've been the entire year. Now 9th in batting average, 287 allowed. So maybe that pitching staff is taking a small steps forward because of Chad Bell's mini resurgence, but looks like he's back to a, cuttable status in terms of foreign import starters. It's like the Heroes and the over. And moving on to the final game, the doubleheader from that Wyverns Wiz matchup. We talked about Despaigne and Jung-Hoon Park earlier. In case you missed that, you can catch the replay of the show on YouTube and Periscope. But last game of this heavy slate should all be played tonight. Going back for a Wiz sweep with Min-Soo Kim on the bump.
I think the Wyverns have a good shot here. I think Sungwon Moon is quite good. He's got 2 bad starts in his last 5, but he's coming off a good start. And those 2 bad starts in his last 5 were the only 2 in his last 15 where he's allowed more than 3 earned runs. So he's been good for a quality start or close to it almost every time out until, again, a couple little hiccups recently. But overall, it's strikeout rate 19.7%, a walk rate of 6.9%. Both of those a little bit more than a tick better than league average. Not quite an ace, but a very strong starter. He's got to be the best on the Wyverns since they don't get anything from Ricardo Pinto, who's their only foreign starter at the moment. So I think he's got a shot to shut down the Wiz, or at least hold them to 2 or 3. And I think that's going to be enough in this one. I think he's significantly better than Min-Soo Kim. Min-Soo Kim is coming off a good start. He's been generally pretty poor, though. He's got an ERA of 6.60 and a WHIP of 187 over his last 6 starts, although that's not a whole lot worse than his season-long numbers. He's been a reliever for much of the year and probably should head back to the bullpen. He just has not really shown anything as a starter. He doesn't strike anybody out, really 13.0% strikeout rate over the season. Better than the worst few guys here, but just allows way too much contact, doesn't allow a ton of walks, but it looks like it's the case that that's because everybody's already hit the ball.
Yeah, we're going to see Wyverns Wiz Game 2, 5:30 a.m. Eastern. So you're going to go with the Wyverns in terms of the total. Am I going to wake up and see Mel Rojas Jr. has hit 4 home runs over 2 games as a doubleheader, and we're going to hit the over in Game 2? Or maybe a little more quiet action as both teams are a little tired, like we talked about a little earlier today.
Yeah, and again, if any of that Wiz core sits for the second game, that could help hit the under. But I think Min-Soo Kim has been shaky enough that I think we get the over here. I think even if Sungwon Moon is good, so is the Wiz lineup. So a good start from him might be, 6 innings, 3 earned runs, and I think the Wyverns could score enough that I think we'll go over here.
All right, that's what we're looking at then. Big slate. Most games I think we've ever talked about on a KBO Chats live. A lot of selections now for the final 3 picks, the top 3 picks overall. Where are you going to go?
Yeah, let's start with the Dan Straley game for the Giants.
Game 2. I like it.
Not all that thrilled about Straley's recent performance, at least in terms of the runs he's allowing. But again, it was 11 strikeouts in his last starts, even though he allowed 5 earned runs. So it's no reason to think that he's lost his edge. I think he's good enough that it's hard not to pick him anytime. And when you've got a struggling starter for the Tigers and a not very good lineup for the Tigers, I think that's the number 1 for me. Number 2, I think it's going to be the Dinos because I don't have much faith in Hyun-Sik Kim. He's coming off a good start, but that 6.15 ERA is pretty reflective of who he's been throughout the year. He just looks generally in over his head as a rookie. Maybe his last start was the start of something, but Drew Wyszynski, even though he's been a bit shaky, I think he's good enough. I think the Dinos lineup is more than good enough to give Wyszynski the help he needs against the starter, who, again, just doesn't necessarily look ready yet. 3rd overall pick this year, probably has a good future ahead of him, but just hasn't shown it. So that's going to be number 2. Number 3, it's between the Bears-Lions over and the Hyunjung Yang game. I think I'm going to go with the Hyunjung Yang game just because Hee Kwon-yu and David Buchanan they give up fewer runs than they're supposed to way too often. I just looking at their underlying numbers, everything I know about analyzing pitchers says that they're due to give up a lot of runs. And I am going to pick the over there, but I'm more into Hyunjung Yang pitching like an ace that he's supposed to be. The Tigers and Giants have been pretty even throughout the year. 2 pretty mediocre lineups, 2 pitching staffs that have been good at times, although the Tigers in general have slipped lately, except for Yang. I think he should continue his ace form, so that's going to be number 3 for me, again, just edging out that over for the Bears-Lions.
Yeah, Buchanan and you just seem to not be great pitchers, but they get the job done when they're on. So I don't blame you there. A little unusual that you've taken Tigers in Game 1, but then the Giants in Game 2. But when you look at the starting pitching, that looks to be the direction. Of course, Preston Tucker can't always throw a wrench into those plans when he's hot, when he's cold. But overall, solid 3 picks. Giants in Game 2, the Dinos and Tigers in Game 1. And that's what we're looking at for today's KBO Chats Live, the entire slate. Be sure to check out RotoWire, the best KBO resources we talked about. Well, actually, we didn't really talk too many injury news, but we do have those available on the site news injury. Anything else notable for tonight's action?
I think that more or less covers it. Just realized it's a bit too bad we don't get to see Straley versus Yang. That would be quite the pitcher's duel. I don't know. I don't know if teams do that on purpose and deliberately misalign their aces to give themselves a better chance in game two. Not really sure what goes into that decision making, but it is odd, like you said, to pick one team in game one and one in the other. But I think the gaps in the pitching staff and the starting pitching matchups in both of those two are pretty wide.
Yeah, especially when the opposing pitchers they're facing have ERAs over 4.5. Yang does have an ERA over 4.5 himself, but recently I think it's been under 2. What did I say? Last 4, he's been under 1.5. So should be good for tonight. As always, check us out on Twitter at RotoWireKBO and our personal accounts at Sports by Pasco and at Eric_Halterman. And that's all I got. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody.